CARPe diem, seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
Welcome to CARPe diem. On this episode, we're focusing on mental health. Now, Stats Canada recently did a survey on mental health, and 1 in 5 Canadians screened positive for symptoms of depression, anxiety, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Our mental well-being is crucial for living a long and healthy life. Now, I recently had the opportunity to speak with famed Japanese dancer Yayoi Hirano, who after a battle with breast cancer in 2015, turned to the ancient Japanese practice of Shinrin-yoku, or we know it as forest bathing. Let's take a look.
Yeah, look at that on the top. After the cancer, I had all kinds of problems because of the chemotherapy. It was so difficult, my disease. I mean, like breast cancer, and then I had to do the chemotherapy. Chemotherapy was so difficult for me. I thought, I'm gonna die. I better to die. I'm gonna jump on in the water to die. My husband and I was walking, and the walking is very good, healing itself. But then we found forest.
Well, it always made her feel better being in nature where you could forget about your worries being out in the forest. And Yayoi's always found interesting things to see in the forest that I would never see. It's sort of a spiritual journey for her being in the forest.
Shinrin-yoku, we say, forest bathing. We often come to the forest and, just take it easy.
It's all about slowing down and observing nature. When we stop and we feel things, we experience them differently. Chronic disease and mental health, the costs of those in Canada now outpace economic growth. I thought, what if our medical system was not based on illness and treating illness, it was based on wellness. We started to do Healthy by Nature events, and we met Dr. Melissa Lem, who's a physician.
I have a really long history of advocating for the nature and health connection, and when I moved to British Columbia in 2016, a couple years later I connected with the BC Parks Foundation, who was actually looking to launch a nature prescription program, so it was like a match made in heaven. PARX is Canada's first national evidence-based nature prescription program where any licensed healthcare professional across Canada can register to prescribe nature. I think for doctors to recommend something, they have to be convinced that there's evidence, which is why we've spent so much of a priority, so much time on making sure that everything we say in our program is based in evidence, from our recommendations on dosing, 2 hours, at least 2 hours a week, at least 20 minutes each time. It's based in studies that just came out 2 years ago.
All of these trees have a chemical compound that they use to fight disease and fight other things. Well, we are basically breathing in and bathing. It's like when you go to the beach and you get the ions from the water, right? You feel great at the beach. Well, there's a chemical reason for that. It's not just the scenery.
If we enter the forest, you hear the sound. I mean, right now, you can hear the birds. Air is different. If you touch tree, you can feel like some kind of energy. Gives me some kind of a healing.
We'd come here often and find a way for Yayoi to feel good about being out here.
One of my friends who is a pianist, 2017, she asked me to perform at the Carnegie Hall. So we went and then performed, and we got the really nice review from New York Times. Yay!
You found a way to commune with the forest whose purpose is to give us healing. And then you went on to conquer Carnegie Hall and the Smithsonian. You performed. It's a very impressive story, and you look amazing today.
I had so many difficulties, and I might be, dead. But whenever we come here, forest saved my life.
Amazing to learn how the beauty of the forest is good for both our bodies and our minds. And I've been practicing forest bathing for years, but never really had a name for it. I just knew that it made me feel better, and now I know why. And I encourage you to do it. The benefits are certainly worth the efforts. When we come back, we talk mental health with Dr. Bal.
As a patient after a horrific car accident, I had to take a lot of drugs. So I realized that drugs are fine, but they're not the ultimate answer. So I wanted a cure that I could empower people with some tools. They could take charge of their health.
CARPe diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
Welcome back. We're on the gorgeous patio of Living Space in downtown Vancouver, and I'm joined by Dr. Bal Pawa. Dr. Pawa, welcome.
Thank you. So great to be here with you again.
And you're the author of, a very well dog-eared book that I love, Mind Body Cure. Tell me what motivated you to write this book.
Well, Carmen, this is a passion project. It's a culmination of 30 years of my clinical practice. And before that, I was a pharmacist. I dispensed drugs. As a doctor, I wrote prescriptions for drugs. And as a patient after a horrific car accident, I had to take a lot of drugs. So I realized that drugs are fine, but they're not the ultimate answer. So I wanted a cure that I could empower people with some tools. They could take charge of their health. And that's what prompted me to get the message out of my head and onto paper so I could give people tools to look at their own mental health and fix their anxiety and have optimal health for themselves.
Yeah. I'm reading this, and it's in the first person, and it's really a testimonial to, mind body cure, but it's like mind over matter in a way.
Yes, and also learn about your physical body symptoms and how they relate to your mental health. Your emotional state equals your physical state. And people don't make that connection. So that's why I wanted their mind and their body. It's seamless. It's all one. Body, mind, body. And so you have to treat the person as a whole.
So we know COVID, of course, has been a terrible trauma on most of us. The whole world is suffering it. Right. Has that really been such a strong catalyst for the demise of our mental health?
I think it was always there. Stress is always there. It's so pervasive, Carmen. But I think that with COVID, it just raised it to a whole new level. And people realize how important it is to have social connections, to be out in nature, to be able to have the freedom to go out. And so all those restrictions in place have escalated the level of anxiety, the level of fearfulness, the uncertainty, and then the financial consequences of COVID as well compounded the problem.
Now, let's say someone's watching, right, and they have a loved one that they're like, I don't know what's going on. What are the symptoms? What should we be looking out for in other people or in ourselves to say, I need help?
Well, there are certain signs that we should watch for. If someone has suddenly socially withdrawn, they're not coming out, they're not answering your phones or your texts, and they're just being very socially withdrawn, that's a distress signal. If they've had attempts at suicide, that's a huge cry for help. If you see them abusing alcohol or doing a lot of what we call stress eating, stress-soothing behaviors that are not healthy, those are some signs. And some people have a very good facade facade and you can't tell that inside they're very depressed. And that's the most dangerous ones. I mean, 1 in 5 Canadians will have had issues with mental health, and after age 40, it's 1 in 2 Canadians. That's a staggering number when you think about, you know, the number of symptoms. But if you think about why are they stressed? What's the opposite of stress? Is resilience. So we have to cultivate resilience, because if you're seeing 75 to 85% of the people getting treated with drugs, and in the last few months, antidepressants, sleeping pills. There's so many drugs, we're throwing pills at it, but then we end up dealing with the side effects of pills. So I think that it's really important for healthcare to go back and fix what's broken, fix the stress perception, the perception of what's causing anxiety. And we can't fix the external. It's an inside job. Health is an inside job. We got to go within.
That's good. That's good. Words of wisdom. When we come back, videographer Dean Atwell heads out to investigate how our mental health will change as we transition out of COVID.
Seeing human tragedy on a fairly regular basis and trying to balance life with 14-hour night shifts.
CARPE diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
Welcome back. The extra attention this time has brought to first responders has allowed us to show gratitude for the risks that these brave men and women take every day to keep us safe. There is at times a huge personal sacrifice that we may not see. Now, videographer Dean Atwell met with firefighter Matt Johnston, who shares how he's helping his colleagues deal with the trauma.
I've been a firefighter for almost 10 years now, gone to over 3,000 emergency calls. I find therapy helps because, one, disruptive sleep patterns automatically throw your emotional health off balance, regardless of if you've had a call or not at work. So it's not just about trauma exposures, it's about finding proper work-life balance between, you know, kind of seeing human tragedy on a fairly regular basis and trying to balance life with 14-hour night shifts.
The psychological stress on first responders has been especially magnified during the pandemic. A local firefighter has stepped up with a solution to help through the creation of a virtual health portal.
The depth of qualified mental health professionals is very shallow in British Columbia. And so that's been a huge barrier to care, is that the top clinicians have long wait times and first responders can't wait. And clinicians can really benefit from really feeling like they're giving back. In fact, if I'm a first responder, I consider them a second responder, you know, because they're dealing with the emotional needs that I have as someone that's attended over 3,000 emergency calls.
Due to the pandemic, there's been an almost 400% increase in the number of clinicians taking the First Responder Health online course, all to be part of the directory.
Often in first responder culture, there's sort of the belief that I can't talk about my problems, I can't talk about what I'm experiencing, I can't talk about all these difficult calls that I've been going to. And so they don't talk about it at work, they don't necessarily talk about it at home because they don't want to burden their families with that. So this is the place where they can come and unburden themselves.
Ultimately, our platform is designed to close the gap between outside mental health professionals and first responders in BC and across Canada. We found that there's a huge service gap between frontline public safety members and mental health professionals.
There are now so many programs to help us manage our mental health issues. Please be on the lookout for distress from those around you. When we come back, we talk to Bill Van Gorder of CARPe about older Canadians and their mental health.
What would have helped would be if people had gotten more familiar with technology earlier so they could have immediately had contact with friends and family.
CARPE diem. Seizing the day for Canadians as we age.
Welcome back. With us now is our colleague Bill Van Gorder from CARPe, and we want to ask him what older Canadians have to say about their mental health. Hola, Bill.
Hello, Carmen. Happy to be here.
I'm always happy to have you with us because you bring a point of view that we all really need to hear about. And I wanted to ask you about the mental health, and you just did a big survey at CARPe on that very subject. Can you give us a little bit of Cole's notes on it?
Well, I certainly can. We did a major survey and we found out that COVID-19 has really created an unprecedented situation when it comes to the mental health of older Canadians. One of the striking points was that 42% of the people responding said that COVID has made their mental health condition worse than it was before. With this survey had over 2,500 people answer it, so it was a good survey. They were finding difficulties with many things that they were used to doing, and they were feeling great stress by the uncertainty and the mixed messaging that they were getting around COVID, all of which made them feel very uncomfortable, very stressed.
Well, I mean, obviously the whole world suffered from the isolation that COVID brought to us, from youth to our elderly, but the elderly were hit especially hard. And what do you think contributed to such a spike, perhaps, in numbers? That, is it technology that could have helped? What would have helped, do you think?
What would have helped would be if people had gotten more familiar with technology earlier so they could have immediately had contact with friends and family. But the other thing that could have helped if there had been clearer messaging from officials who, although trying very honestly to make sure that people understood what a problem COVID was and how dangerous, it really frightened a lot of seniors. And some of the mixed messaging, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, really created that anxiety.
But of course, another issue that the respondents would have had is the whole lockdown. A lot of people were suffering social isolation even before COVID, but this really just shut the door on almost all participation, and I think that probably would have impacted them a lot.
It certainly did. We think of people in long-term care facilities as being isolated, but even people who were living in their own homes felt isolated because the people who normally visited them, supported them, helped them do things weren't able because of COVID restrictions to do that. So they felt very isolated, and often they felt that the officials were making it so difficult for them to have any kind of contact with other people.
We see this sort of like the light at the end of the tunnel with COVID, and there's been a lot of pain through this process. What do you see, what do you think that we need to start doing now for our older Canadians?
I think there are a number of things that we need to do. First of all, we have to renew our personal contact. They're looking for that. When we ask older Canadians what's the thing they have missed most about the last year in lockdown, the answer is not going outside, not seeing people, not being able to do the so-called normal things. Their biggest wish is that they could hug people again. And I think, the physical contact, I think we forget how important physical contact is for everyone, and especially older Canadians. So that's one of the things we have to encourage as quickly as we can. The other thing we have to do is get rid of that stigma about mental health and encourage people to talk about it. And every province in the country has a seniors helpline of one kind or another. a telephone line or email online where people could reach out and get the kind of help they need and direction. We urge people to do that. If they go to the CARPe.ca website, they'll find links to that kind of information. Let's talk about mental health. Let's talk about getting back into more normalized times again.
Oh, I'm so with you. I know we've all been traumatized, but we just know that our older population has suffered greatly through this. Bill, thank you again for joining us. Admitting that our mental health is suffering is no longer the stigma that it once was. At least it shouldn't be. We all need to remember to stay in close touch with the older people in our lives because social isolation is painful in so many ways. I was calling my father in Spain almost daily, but now he's got friends that put us together on video calls. So at least we get to see each other, and that's been a huge help. When you see someone on that screen, it's almost like being there, and it's amazing to have the technology, so please use it. Well, that's the show. If you'd like to see a conversation happen here, please get in touch. And remember, as our CARPe president Moses Neimer always says, the best way to keep going is to keep going. So carpe diem and seize your day.